surprised by how it ended up in the end? Because I mean, you've been working on it for so long.
That was sort of the plan. You know, I could describe the movie. Oh, it's over 12 years, first through 12th grade. Ends up him going to college. I could explain it. And then people say, well, but what happens? And I'm like, oh, I knew you'd ask that. You know, it's like, not much. You know? But I was really counting on like the cumulative effect of a life that would actually, you know, the way we identify with people, and you would hopefully care about this family and these people, and it would add up to something, you know. So, but I kind of bet on that early on. That was my feeling. That's kind of how your memory works when you think back on your life. It's not always the big moments that are supposed to be such a big deal. It's like, why do I keep thinking of that weekend or that moment? You know, so it kind of unfolds like that. That's what I was going for.
I don't wanna be the big man. I just wanna fly.
The big moment was casting, you know, the young boy. I met a lot of kids, you know, and they were all actors. I didn't want to just pull a kid off, you know, the playground or anything. I wanted to, you know, someone who had acted, who had their hat in the ring, I guess, as an actor. So Eller had been in an indie film and maybe a commercial or something, but he came in, and I just kind of liked his demeanor. He was this kind of cool kid who, you know, pretty unconventional. He probably ethereal, I think. He just seemed like the most mysterious, interesting kid. A lot of them were more like, you know, they're in Little League, and they're, you know, you can tell they're like kind of clean cut, and they're gonna go, this kid's gonna go his own way, you know, in some way. And his parents are artists, his dad's a musician. And I kind of thought he'd grow up and be in a band or something, but he ended up a visual artist, taking pictures and drawing, painting, you know, stuff like that.
What do you want to be, Mason? What do you want to do?
Eller was the most consistent of all. You know, we never had scheduling issues with him. He homeschooled quite a bit. That helps. And then, you know, Patricia and Ethan, they always had these professional schedules. I was doing a lot of other films too, so it was really hard to put it all together. But Eller never wavered. He was just always into it, always up for whatever meetings. And, you know, as he matured, he became more of a just creative collaborator. You know, his ideas, kind of where he was at developmentally, you know, so it was a true collaboration, like I would with anyone. I knew his character, and whatever my preconceived notions for the character would kind of meld somewhere in there. It would go where he went.
Mom, haven't you been drinking?
A little bit.
Oh.
It was all outlined and kind of planned out, but not the specifics. The structure, the architecture was all set, I would say. Patricia remembers me telling her exactly what her character, oh, you're gonna get divorced and you're gonna get your, you know, master's degree. And, you know, I kind of laid out what the 12 years would look like for her character. But the specifics, you know, you don't know there's gonna be a, you know, Obama election of 08, you know, in 02. So, but you know something's gonna happen. You know, like that's how we proceed through life though, right? Everything we talk about has a life analogy. It's like, well, you can plan for the future, you can work towards something, but you don't know what's gonna happen specifically. You just sort of roll with it. And that's what this whole film was. You know, it was kind of a leap of faith to the random unknown, I guess, of the future, but that was the deal.
All right, don't worry about it.
Wish we could use the bumpers.
You don't want the bumpers. Life doesn't give you bumpers.
What about Patricia and Ethan? How did they react when you told them about this project? And
You know, artists are great. You know, I really divide the world between artists and everybody else. I mean, they were just in. They were like, yeah, what a weird idea. Think of yeah, you could tell a story. They were with it. You know, business people, producers, they kind of, what the fuck are you talking about? They eyes glaze over and they're like, huh? You're asking me to, 13 years from now? You know, if you add up each year's effort to only shoot, you know, the numbers made so much of this movie makes no sense. You know, any kind of practical level. Still doesn't.
What were you trying to do with the music? It looked like you were picking it from the time you were shooting.
That was always the idea, that it would be music. I mean, like I said, I wanted the whole thing to seem like a memory. And, you know, music's has specific associations if it's personal to you. So I was trying to get music from those years that would kind of place you there. This whole thing was weird. We were shooting a period piece film in the present tense, you know, every year. So kind of putting the music together was a pretty fascinating experience, you know, to get songs that I thought resonated or maybe fit that year or what it needed. The film, like, I guess I early on thought there'd be a score would work, but it didn't work at all. It just, the idea of a score didn't work. It felt too like there was a authorial or something, you know, it just, the music from, it just had to be songs, you know, and they're not all contemporary, you know, there's a few throwbacks, you know, we got the Pink Floyd, the Beatles, you know.
Was it hard to get the music? Was that the biggest line item in your budget? Or not? I mean, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah,
but
it turned out to be really a huge post expense. That was a little thing I dropped on IFC and post. Well, good news, we through production on time and on budget, but now we got to finish the damn thing, and we don't have a budget for music. But we got good deals, but still there's so much. But everybody, I was really thrilled. You know, everybody came aboard. You know, we got Arcade Fire, Coldplay. You know, so many. I was just very touched that people wanted to be a part of it. Even my music supervisor, Randy Proster, I had, when they're pulling up, initially I had the George Harrison song, What Is Life? And after he's talking about the Black Album. But he said, oh, that's going to be hard. You know, we're not going to get that one. Some estate issues. He had been through it on that one before. So I'm like, fine. You know, I looked for others. And, you know, Paul McCartney said yes to Band on the Run, one of the greatest pop songs ever. I mean, it was, we had a deep bench. And I, you know, I knew enough to, like, when the college girls singing Pink Floyd, you know, Wish You Were Here, once we got that, I said, okay, now we're going to film another song. You know, so in each case, even when Lorelai at the beginning is singing the Britney Spears song, I did another take of her singing Diamonds Are a Girl's Best Friend from Gentlemen, because she was singing and dancing to that right then. She was a huge Marilyn Monroe fan and loved that movie so much. So I said, let's do one of those just in case 12 years from now I can't clear. So I've done this enough to know, like, okay, cover your ass. So we were able to do that with, if bands didn't want to be in the music, and some didn't, you know. It's funny, I could get Bob Dylan, Paul McCartney, Arcade Fire, Coldplay, but we couldn't get Weezer. No way. No way.
So was that Beatles Black Album, is there an actual playlist?
Yes, no.
was there an
that
actual playlist for the Beatles?
That was a real thing Ethan Hawke had made for his daughter. Some version of that. Yeah, and so he told me about that. I'm like, what a cool thing. And you know, we thought, it's a long car ride that they're on, like, what would you talk about? So we worked that into the scene. So I'm hoping that will, maybe it could be an iTunes thing or something, the Black Album.
So a question about you
Yeah.
had an outline from the beginning, but when and how did you write the dialogue for each of, you know?
Yeah,
for
good
each
question. I
scenes?
mean, it was sort of like, had the outline, would usually I would edit what we shot, adjoin it to everything that came before, so I had this ever-growing, you know, living, breathing thing. I could then edit all that again, and then just sit with it for all the time until we shot again. Maybe watch it late at night and think about where it's going, work on an outline of what was next. Sometimes I knew very specifically. I would say, okay, next year, as we wrapped that year, I'd say, okay, next year we have the road trip and this and that. I wanted everybody thinking about it. But oftentimes, I just would spend all that gestation time. You know, film doesn't give you that. You know, film is like, you have a script and then you have production and post-production and release dates, and you know, you're just kind of like manufacturing something. This wasn't even a film. It was like, kind of like a time poem, you know, a time sculpture or something. You know, it was like, it didn't have the film expectations or constraints. So, you know, in an indie world, you really got to use your time. That's the one thing you have, you know, that's often, it's your cheapest thing, and you really have to use it, whether it's for rehearsals, writing, you know, you can do all that. So I used all that time, just thought about it, and then worked from an outline, would write sample dialogue, and often when the actors would come in, we'd rehearse a lot, workshop it. And sometimes we were working up the scenes to the last minute, you know, the night before, we would be scrambling, but that's coming after a year of thinking about it. You know, I would get with Eller throughout the year, I would call Patricia or Ethan, and it was kind of ongoing. You know, it wasn't like put it on the shelf and don't think about it for a year. It was sort of an ongoing thing. You know, Ethan would call me up and have ideas, and it was a fun fun life project. I don't know any other way to put it. You know, Eller would call me up, hey, I'm thinking about getting an earring. Is that okay? You know, I'm like, okay, you know, whatever. You had to think about this one.
Relishing the fact that this film is, I mean, you spent 12 years in this film, or more than that, and it's been so well received and people absolutely love it. How does that make you, I mean...
That's great. It was something you spend so much time on, to feel like it's being accepted in the spirit that it was kind of put out there. That's always satisfying, you know. But I don't think any of us have really even processed it being kind of over. And I don't think, even when it'll be out in July, but I still don't think I'll accept it until a year goes by and we don't shoot it, you know? Like kind of like the first year you're not in school ever, you know? It's like, wait, fall and there's no, I don't have a paper due. You know, you just like, I don't know, still processing it.
Well, I think we're running out of time, but I want to say that, you know, it's interesting. I mean, despite the fact that you're from Texas, Seattle has sort of adopted you as one of their favorite filmmakers, and the Seattle Film Festival has been, we've loved having you here.
Yeah. I mentioned briefly at the beginning, but you know, Seattle's been so special to me. Seattle was the first town I ever got a good reception to anything I'd ever done. My first film that I cared to submit to a film festival, Slacker, we showed it at the USA Film Festival in Dallas, and it got an okay audience response, but you know, the local critics were like, you know, self-loathing Texans, you know, it was kind of like, you know, would have been a good short, but it's boring, you know, that's Dallas, you know. Come to Seattle, and I'll never forget, Nick Broman, John Prey, they had the guys from the committee, and I'm a nobody from nowhere, just sending a VHS tape of my movie, hoping to show it somewhere. And they called me up, Daryl, who ran the festival, called me up and said, hey, these guys told me if I didn't show this movie, they were resigning. I'm like, really? And so they really played the film up. This is in 1990. And I got here, and around the block, the audience coming in looked like people, this is, you know, Nirvana, early Nirvana, grunge. They looked like they were from the movie. I was like, that's our audience. And we had this great screening, and so much good, you know, a year later we got a distributor after that, so I always felt like, wow, I really owe something. You know, have those moments in your life that you kind of hit a thing and you either go that way or that way, or, you know, so it's Seattle to me always represented that. You know, nothing but positive love.
You'll be returned home safely, but forever changed.